This evening's Dharma talk is titled, "This is not a performance." So what I'm endeavoring to convey by that Dharma talk title is to give you a little bit of a understanding of how this functions. Vocal cords, whatever this is, the spinning. So what I'm saying is, even though I might come in and maybe think before I leave the Hojo or come in Zendo, I think I'm going to talk about the Four Noble Truths, or I'm going to talk about the three marks of existence, or I might have even said to whoever's posting this online, because whoever's handling that, it's usually Junshu, but she's in a 10-day solitary retreat right now. And today it was a Kozan? Yeah, Kozan, who is the Ino. She said, have a talk title, which happens. And I usually don't, but sometimes I do. And so it can show up in any direction. But I have to say to you, I have no idea what I'm going to do or say. Even if I say I'm going to give it a title, that doesn't mean anything. When I say when I'm saying when this is not a performance, I'm actually coming in here without a clue. This would be ego language, without a clue of who I am, what I'm doing. And a number of years ago, not too many, maybe 20, 30 years ago, I would be terrified to come in here and not knowing what I was going to say or what I was going to do. And now I can't do it any other way. There isn't anything else but this. And I am not particularly terrified by this anymore. But I certainly was for a long time, from the time I was born until I started to recede, I think is the proper word, after I met my guru. And am I promoting gurus? Am I a guru? I'm not a guru. I'm not promoting gurus. You don't need a guru. You don't even need me. I don't have anything to sell. On the other hand, if you're here, you could listen. You could consider my performance. Because of course I'm performing something. I mean, if I go like this, that's could be called performance. But as I said, I might give a talk title, and today was, I think that this idea arose a while back, but it never showed up as a title for a talk. Whereas today, when Kozan came in at, I don't know what time it was. Before 7, you have a talk title. And so that started to show up. And I think it was connected with some other thought pattern. Maybe it was connected. I think I was having an interview with Sokuzan, or you were starting one then. Yeah, it might have had something to do with that, but I have no idea. And again, I have no idea what I'm going to say. I'm just kind of, you could say I'm making it all up, but actually, I know I'm not making anything. I'm just not getting in the way of whatever's surfacing. So you guys are probably downloading crap into my mind. Stop it. Except Michael. Michael, you can download anything you want. Not that one. Yeah, there you go. That's better. So what's the intention? What's the motivation? The motivation, the intention is to respond to people in however it's showing up in any one individual, and however it's showing up in this old man. Because the confusion has not disappeared over here. There are different ways of teaching this. Some people say the Buddha said, as far as we know, the Four Noble Truths: life is suffering. You're the blame for it, or it's caused because you want something else. and it can come to an end. Nirodha, the cessation. And I won't totally disagree with that, but I have a different way of looking at it than perhaps is commonly recommended. And the last one is, how do you get to this Nirodha thing? How do you get this the suffering to stop? Had enough, worn out from suffering, or worn out from picking and choosing and fighting and agreeing and disagreeing. Shila, Samadhi, and Prajna are the last three are sit down, discipline, look at it, Samadhi, and Prajna, see what it is, simply put. And will that end suffering? I don't know. Hasn't ended any suffering here. If my suffering that had started up when I first realized I was in a body again, if my suffering had come to an end through the sitting practice of meditation, I wouldn't be able to teach, because I would have eliminated the very thing that most of the world is dealing with. So what did happen? Did anything happen? Is this a performer? Is this performing some idea, some kind of idea or a mental thing that arises and comes and goes, and understanding and no understanding? You should always answer rhetorical questions with a rhetorical answer, of course. I like that atmosphere joke. That was good. I won't tell it. Let you tell it. Yes.
In a way you wouldn't be able to teach, but I'm just wondering, what are you encouraging us to do with our situation?
Be aware of it without any lamination on top of it. Whatever shows up, no praise, no blame, no conclusion, no exclusion, nothing extra. And that takes a lot of Shila, Samadhi, and Prajna. Not just on the cushion, but eventually it starts to leak into your everyday life. Not because you're trying to be mindful. I don't teach meditation and action as an activity to try to be more aware of what you're doing. Maybe a little bit, about the length of a mouse whisker. More? Less? Paul and Mary Ford, yes.
Have you just stopped separating yourself from suffering?
Paraphrase that.
Do you become suffering in a sense?
The way in which you're characterizing it might not hold up very well, but there's a dimension that is like that. And I would say it this way: you're not really too concerned about getting away from suffering or creating more suffering. If you're concerned about anything, you're concerned about what this is fundamentally. And am I, insofar as there is one, am I really needed here for anything? Is there anything I fundamentally need to do? Do I have to do anything at all? This is why the ancient teaching of Taoism and ancient teaching of Buddhism are not particularly at war with each other. More? Go ahead. You got it.
Before you were talking years ago, I was wondering what that means for the fear to recede, or what happened.
Mm-hmm. So the fear actually hasn't receded, but the imputation of someone who is in danger of being embarrassed or in danger of having their misunderstanding pointed out or their lack of clarity pointed out by others, even in the form of gossip in the other room after the old man has left. That's no longer there. And what is no longer there? someone that's afraid. But has the fear gone anywhere? No. Thanks to you guys. What do I mean by that? What do I mean by thanks to you guys? Does everybody jump to the same conclusion? Is there a conclusion? Is there anyone jumping? Don't hesitate. I don't. Goes on.
What is not hesitating?
No more armor. No more protection. And it's not out of some kind of arrogance or bullheadedness or chauvinism, not out of nobody's going to take me down kind of self-lecture. But there's nothing is endangered. And that is true here and it's true everywhere. It's true there. It's fundamentally the truth. If you realize it, the warfare is over. You'll no longer fight with anything. You'll no longer run from anything. You'll no longer join anything, nor will you refuse anything. It's called, well, I'm not going to tell you what it's called. You tell me what it's called. What is it? What is that?
Freedom.
Is it? Freedom from what?
Just freedom. That's what you say.
So you're just repeating what I say?
I am.
Is that like the Dogen chapter we read today? Is that what somebody said? Wasn't that what it is? Those guys are amazing. Especially the one about this being charged for the straw sandal. That's all I can remember, so I can't tell you anymore. Yes.
You said that the fear hasn't gone anywhere. So do you experience it?
It is experienced. I'm not making any claims that I'm some wonderful guy who can have fear without being afraid, I'm not going into any kind of elaboration. It's just if fear comes up. But there's no one that minds that because it's seen for what it is. It's just an illusion. It's just a makeshift. It's just concocted out of causes and conditions that are always looking for some kind of an arbiter, someone to take this and run with it. It's like a football field with no football and no players and no scrimmage line. Should I go on? Should I shut up?
To see that fear as an illusion, does that require some kind of concentration?
No. And first, before we see it as an illusion, you have to see it as an intense reality without flinching, without turning away, without attribution, without blaming, without abandoning that intense scariness, without doing nothing with it. Don't blame anybody for it. Don't blame yourself. No scolding, no lecturing. It's as if you were gonna experience this kind of difficulty from now on. And that is called what? Generosity. You're actually giving your attention to whatever arises. You can practice on your own emotions. So when you get up off the cushion, when somebody talks to you, you can completely be with them. You can receive what's happening. Not easy to be with crazy people when you're endeavoring to work with your own insanity because it tends to resonate. Somebody's doing something, shifting this way and that way, and passion, aggression, and ignorance is arising, and you can see that you were feeling fine till you came in this room and started interacting or listening to these people, or this person said that, this person said that. You're doing just fine. But now all of a sudden somebody's got your number or your frequency and you can feel it and you want out of there. And I would say, don't do anything. Don't even accept it. Even accepting it is this is what accepting something looks like. I've stopped looking at it because now I've accepted it. I'm the person, you see me? I'm the person who's accepted everything. Don't accept anything. Don't ignore it. Don't look away. Don't do anything with it. Do nothing with it. It's a fundamental minimalist. It's just a minimalist attitude towards everything. Less is better. Unless it's margarine, and then less is butter. If
this is not a performance, then what is it?
Good one. Let's see. No performer. The performance is happening, of course, it's a performance, but I would have been better off to, why didn't you correct me when I said that? You should have said Sokuzan, shouldn't you say no performer?
What did you say?
I should have said that. You should have titled the talk, what did you say?
No, how about just what?
What? Okay, I'll slow down and stop. I'll stop being an idiot for a while. Try to respond to your questions. Thank you.
When you say that the fear or whatever it is that's resonates to be experienced as reality, or you can see that it's an illusion, how do we not do anything with it if it feels like reality?
You've done it. If it feels like reality, don't do nothing with it. Let it eat you alive. Who you are is totally not in danger. Who you actually are. Who you think you are is scared. How do I know? This is how I know. I know this, I know this, I know this. And that's how I'm able to respond to you in a way to encourage you to be genuine, be who you are. Nothing to change, nothing to get rid of. There's no enlightenment to attain. Now, there are people who talk about this differently. Maybe they make more sense. Go listen to them. I don't require any listeners.
If there's nothing to change,
Keep going.
I guess I just get confused about doing nothing with what arises, yet there's still nothing to change, because it seems like
Yes.
I want to do something with whatever arises.
Just watch it. Just watch the desire to have something else happen. Then you're actually looking at what the Buddha saw 2,500 years ago when he awoke and came out of that understanding and said, life is suffering, and it's caused because we want something else. You're actually right down to the bare bones of what the Buddha saw, and you're seeing it yourself. Just continue. You're not separate from the Buddha. You just don't know it. When you see this, you'll go back in time 2,500 years, and you'll go forward. You go backward. Those are confusing things that are meant to help us, but they're confusing from the ultimate point of view, which is not a point of view. Yes, go ahead.
You said that your viewpoint or something on the third noble truth is a little bit different than the ending of suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Can you say a little bit more about what it is to you?
Teachers tend to say that your suffering will come to an end, Nirodha, but it's a Hinayana path. The Mahayana path is you don't abandon anyone, so you don't become a Pratyeka Buddha, or you don't become someone who's ended their suffering and is pretty good, ahead of everybody. And too bad about those guys down the valley, still suffering. So the Bodhisattva path is one where you transcend the imputation of a self and of an other, and you see that the suffering that's anywhere is still, you still have that suffering. But what's different is there's no solid being who is suffering. There's no solid being who is suffering here, and there's no solid being who's suffering out there. But the individuals out there don't know that. They still think the suffering is real. They think they're real. They think you're real. So there's a grasping at I got to get out of here. This is real. Whereas realization is not about the ending of suffering so much as it's about seeing through the solidity of anyone who suffers.
So does the Pratyeka Buddha actually end suffering?
For themselves. I mean, but there's a duration to it, because there's a beginning and an end. Then there's going to be duration. So they might attain that kind of individual liberation, 1.5-fold egolessness. So tarpa. They might see completely through themselves and partially through others. So that's why it's said that the Pratyeka Buddha thinks they're awake, just a way of talking about it, and thinks other people they could awaken, but they're not. So still asleep. So I'm awake, but everyone else is not. You've met people like that. There was one who was here, who lived here for a little while, who thought they were awake and thought other people were asleep. Spent a lot of time talking to Kyun, I remember that. Did she convince you?
Maybe for a while.
For a while, yeah. Very, very kind, sweet person. No doubt about that. Not taking anything away from them. Yes.
Sometimes you say something like, everyone is already not separate from the Buddha, but we just don't see it yet. How is that different than how you just described the Pratyeka Buddha?
I'm not sure what you're asking me.
You said it in a way like they saw through themselves, but they still see other people that haven't seen that could see it. And sometimes you say that we just don't realize that yet, and it seems like that's a really similar dynamic. And I'm wondering if there's a way that
You think you're awake?
No,
But
it's
then you're not a Pratyeka Buddha. The Pratyeka Buddha thinks they've realized no self. They think they've attained enlightenment, and their style may be such that they would never proclaim that, because that would appear kind of unenlightened, and they're very concerned about how they appear. Yes.
Has there been a realization with the Pratyeka Buddha?
Yes, relatively, yes. They've understood, because they understood the five skandhas. They understood the Four Noble Truths, and they've had a limited realization of no self. They see the five skandhas: form, feeling, perception, concept, consciousness, and they see that construct does not add up to an identity. So therefore, they're beginning to see. They have seen some of that, and they've looked at the three marks of existence, the four marks. They've looked at the 12 links in the chain of existence and see how that fabrication doesn't create a solid being, and then they can identify with that. But it's not that it doesn't have a lot of intuitive fragrance to it, but most of it is intellectual. There's some drift that's coming out of there that's beginning to see, and if they happen to, based on the karma that brought them into that dynamic, it's possible they could transcend that. Unlikely to happen without a teacher, without somebody coming up and, snapping your earlobes. Some people, Pratyeka Buddhas, get really long earlobes. I mean, they're kind of Buddhas.
Question from Eric Wilson. He says, I have a quick question. What is the difference between being spontaneous and being impulsive? Thank you so much.
So, different ways of talking about it, and we've talked about this some before. So I'll go with the impulsive first. It's going to come out of hope and fear, and out of not of feeling like you only have so much time to get what you want, and I can't wait too much longer. I've got to get this. So there's some kind of impulse happen. I need to do this now. This has to happen now. Kind of demand on something. I can't wait any longer. So there's a kind of an impulsiveness. It's you perceive something and you have an impulse about it. Whereas one who is might be operating more out of spontaneity, they've already understood that through their awareness practice. I'm just characterizing it, painting a little picture here. But they've understood that actually leads to just more issues, more problems, more circularity. So there might be a little bit more what's commonly called creativity. They might be tuning into things and receiving. They might be on receive rather than on some kind of audit that's going on with their environment and with their life. So they're on receive. So they're receiving things they don't understand, they don't know. They're hearing sound, smells, taste, touch. Even thoughts are just coming and going and coming and going. And if one is actually receiving one's karma and everything from the shape of your earlobes to the tendency to have migraines, any causes and conditions that are arising, just open up and just be genuine. You didn't create. Go look in the mirror. You didn't do this. I'm not saying you didn't have some part in it, but not the kind of part that we usually attribute to someone who's doing something or not doing something else. Doing this but not doing that. I'm doing this but I'm not doing that. That kind of intense polarity is not occurring in terms of this body form. Go look. See, look at your ears, look at your nose, look at the shape of your nostrils. Did you go in there and say, well, I need to be this shape. I need to have this kind of nose. I need to be a Caucasian, need to be male, need to be male, but I need to be not sure about my sexual orientation, or I need to be, you know what I'm saying? I don't need to go very far with this to say, you didn't create this. I'm not saying you didn't create it ultimately, of course you did, but fundamentally, relatively, in that kind of sad sack sort of way, you didn't have much say so about it. You're just at the mercy of your karma until you realize what karma is. And when you realize what it is, you don't object to anything. You don't agree with anything. And you don't what? Ignore anything insofar as you can while you're downloaded into this amazing biological form we call human beings. You're not even a human being. Who you are transcends even this relative complex. Go ahead.
Does impulse need to fall away eventually?
Probably. It might, depending on your life, it depends on causes and conditions. It might show up for a long time where you just don't do anything with it. You just notice it. It's just like, your, say if you had a wall that was made of rubber, okay? You're in a room that's also made of rubber. And then somebody in the other room keeps running against the wall, you kind of feel it. But there's no doorway. And you look, there's no way that can get through that doorway. So you just notice that you have an impulse coming from the other room. Now, the impulsiveness, there isn't even any wall. It's just got you because of the awareness has been sucked down into the right and wrong complex of belief and disbelief, up and down, back and forth, life and death, and all the polarities of the 8 worldly dharmas. All you have to do is see those for that to all start to dissolve. The thing that makes it difficult is you might have to look at that damn thing for a long time. Looking at your watch. It's been 18 years I've been meditating now. I've actually had people talk to me, and some of them are students of mine. I've been meditating for 20 years. Am I ever going to understand what this is? And of course, what do? I look at my watch. How long? I try to have a sense of humor. I learned this from Sokuzan. I'm still thinking about that joke you told. I'm not going to tell it though. It's your joke. I'm not going to tell Sokuzan's joke. Yet. Yes.
Is there someone that is a bodhisattva?
So the bodhisattva doesn't belong to anybody. The bodhisattva ideal of the hero of the Buddhist path is the bodhisattva, one who saves all beings, serves all beings, and gets no credential, gets no reward, no merit badge, and doesn't really care one way or the other. If the merit badge comes, it receives it. If the merit badge doesn't come, no success, no failure. Praise and blame, they are empty of the energy they once had when they were under the sway of the self called narcissism, me, and my stuff, my ideas, my great, wonderful creations, and so on. Which one would be easier?
Are doing the forms a performance?
They can show up as a performance if you're initially. I'm not trying to get rid of a performance particularly, but just be aware that, like, if someone's training you to do the doshi form or the Dhamana or any one of the forms that we have in the monastery, which are meant to help us see more clearly, encourage the awareness around the form because they're repeated or we try to repeat them. Then if someone is, you're kind of performing somewhat so that you can actually learn the form. So, and you might start to do it and say, no, you hold your hands this way, move this, now reach for this. Use both hands when you put one hand over here so both hands are moving with the incense to light the incense from the can, those kind of things. So then the person training you, you're somewhat doing a performance. You're following a form and the person's saying, no, you're moving too fast, you're moving too slow, you're chanting too fast, you're chanting too slow, a little higher, a little lower, a little, just like I was what was I doing? Try to have a better memory. Don't be like me. Try to remember better. Darn it all, it's all cracking apart for me. It's gone. Further question?
Earlier, when you were talking about the Pratyeka Buddha, lots of stories in Buddhism and other spiritual realized people, it seems like they have some occurrence or some insight, but then they go away for a long time and meditate. So would those people initially be described like Pratyeka Buddhas?
Not necessarily. Not if this is quite common. I don't say it happens with everybody, and I haven't done a study on it, and I'm not a scholar or have any understanding of that particularly. But what I have understood, it seems that if people do have a powerful insight of some kind, if they can either, when I say either, it's not an either or so much, but they could just make that into something and begin to fluff themselves up as a teacher because they have this great insight of no self. Run into a few people that start to proclaim stuff before the whole thing even ferments. Might have to sit there for a while. Has anybody ever had cheese that was made in one day? Not good. It's called Velveeta. Not good. I mean, it looks good, smells good, tastes good if it's heated up to a high temperature and mixed with horseradish. But it's not actual cheese. So I'm just using that as a metaphor. So someone who sees this usually has to go and sit down for a while and allow that understanding to you could say deepen or to ripen or to ferment or to age, some kind of understanding so that there's complete clarity about that. So that's it's called in the name of Jamgon Kongtrul's book on the four preliminaries practices, Nundro. It's called The Torch of Certainty. Just read the book title. You don't need to read the whole book. The Torch of Certainty, that flame, that fire, that light, that brilliance, so you're absolutely certain of what that is. You're so certain of what that is that no one can, it's a kind of certainty that is unconditional. And you're so, you know how you can test yourself? You're ready to die for that? I'm not talking about when I was in the Marine Corps trying to figure out if I need to die for my country. That was confusing. See, did my dad die for his country? He was 26 years old. He went to a war in the Second World War he didn't want to go to, and they made him go because of laws. He went there and knowing he probably wouldn't come back, and he was right. He didn't. He died there. Did he die for his country? Is this the country he died for? It's like on the moon, there's no atmosphere. I know that part of a joke I just heard, but I can't remember the first part, which quite often goes with this territory. Yes, sir.
How do we see impulse when it seems like it comes from ignorance?
You just described it perfectly. You're actually seeing it. It's just that when we do see that, quite often, all of the talons, the tentacles, and the claws and everything are coming with it because we've only seen the leading edge of it. We're not done yet. Continue to look at that, and it's called renunciation. What are you renouncing? You're renouncing anything. You're renouncing any success story. You're renouncing any lessening of your grievances. You don't need anything else. You don't even need to attain enlightenment. You don't need any credentials. It's called Trungpa Rinpoche called it Buddha Dharma, or awakened truth. Buddha, awakened, Dharma, truth, with no credentials.
So when you say that I'm only seeing the leading edge of it, does that imply that there's more to see?
No.
And if there is more to see, then how does that not turn into a success story?
Because they're not real jewels. They're fake. I mean, you get the success, but it's not real. It's still flawed with relative contamination. So you see that glitter, someone else might see it. Someone else might think, you've really changed a lot, Michael. Since you've been meditating, I've noticed that you're much nicer. Don't believe them. Don't argue with them. Don't say, oh, no, I'm not. No, you're in my mind, you'd be repulsed. Come on. You're all done. Any other questions? You,
If someone thinks they're awake, then is the renunciation the part that's still not developed or happening?
I think if someone's coming to that conclusion, that may not last. If they have the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha is probably not going to let them get away with that. They better be awake, because the Sangha will pick you apart. Maybe not deliberately be mean to you, but if that realization has any odor of pretense to it, you can't hide it. You can't. Yes.
And is that a suggestion of the receiver still there behind the receiving?
Say more. Tell me more about how you're coming up with that.
If they're receiving, but there's still, like you said, some kind of smell, or they're not completely renunciating what's happening, then there's someone doing that.
Okay.
Is that the receiver that's still there?
What do you think? Jadon doesn't know. How about the others on? Do you use that? You know? You know? Okay. You said yes?
You give them a thumbs up.
You're going to give them a thumbs up?
Just one.
Is that enough?
Never seems to be enough.
Second noble truth. I follow you a little bit, but I can't, and I don't mean to be mocking what you're at. It's a good question, but I can't. Nothing is coming up that would I think would be helpful. If you want to paraphrase that again, I'll try again.
What receives when there's no receiver?
Just have to use those words because they're relative, but it's just receiving. There's just a receiving. Just a receiving. It's just, and even that is too much because there isn't any. Nothing actually occurs there. It's an illusion. This whole thing is an illusion. You know, that doesn't make any sense. Of course, it's not an illusion. That's solid. How's that an illusion? An illusion is real, solid. Yeah. Pleasant dreams. Susan.
Is there still a sense of participating in the performance?
Yes, it's even stronger. It could be even stronger than coming in with some kind of concoction of a performance, of trying to live up to certain ideas, certain performance, like all of you have heard of method acting. You know, a way of I could be all off on this because I don't teach acting, nor am I an actor, other than I'm kind of acting now, somewhat acting foolish. But there's some kind of way or method of doing that to actually provide you or me or us or an audience with some kind of believability, because it has such a strong layer. I don't know how else to say that. Whereas this, no performance here. What is intended here is there's no conclusion. There's no, I mean, I might say some things, you might laugh. I have no idea why you're laughing. Did I make myself clear? Yes? Were you the one asking the question? Yeah. Sometimes I get confused. And you could say, I've noticed. Is that coming up yet? That other question? You have a question now? No. We got a few minutes if anybody wants to confuse me more. Yes.
How do you stay with the texture of fear or let it become your reality?
So I would say notice and be aware of the way you avoid it. The way you, what kind of, I'll just say it very literally, what kind of particles of passion, aggression, ignorance, which little tiny, like metaphorical thought patterns that we stick onto it. It's like Post-it notes on something and we don't want to know what it is. We don't want to really know what, we don't want to know that is a turtle skeleton. So we put little Post-it notes on it and then redefine it. Sure, it's a dumb image, but that's all I got. But we don't want to know that, so we pat it down with all kinds of ideas that separate us from it. It's not real. It won't last. And all the little mini lectures we give ourselves. And so it's not so much about not doing that. That's a misunderstanding. That's more of a materialistic attitude, spiritual materialism, trying to get rid of negativity. It's more about witnessing, letting the negativity take on its own situation, because everything is self-arisen, self-existing. It's dependently arisen in samsaric world of cause and effect, up and down, back and forth, and your karma is going to drag you into a train wreck. But the path to understanding what dependent origination is just observe it. To just observe, so then you can see that everything that occurs in one way of looking is because of everything else that's occurring. That's dependent origination. But then also anything that occurs is completely separate and discrete from everything else that's occurring. So therefore, there's just that Post-it note, and it just comes back around full circle, right back to that happened. We see that we're actually preventing ourselves from seeing the truth, which is you're not separate from anything, and who you are, if there is a you, is not threatened. There's no way you can, who you actually are. I mean, someone can threaten you, somebody can kill you, they can chop off your head, they can run you through with what's that they call those, pig stickers. Yeah, they can run that, or a samurai sword. They can take you out physically or with your body-mind complex, but who you are can't be found because it is separate from anything. Yes.
Seems like conceptually, the teaching of things not being separate kind of fits well with the one way you described dependent origination, where kind of like an interpenetrating causality. But then when you kind of flipped it around to where things are self-existing, how does not separate show up in that sense?
Because it's just that. It's just that. So instead of saying it's just this, we're all one, which is baloney. It's a misunderstanding to look around and say we're all one. And it just creates more chaos to do that. Pronounce nothing. Perform nothing. More about that if you have it.
So when we say it's just that, what is that not separate from?
Anything. So it is the very thing that's, when we say not separate, the very thing that is pointed at is not everything that is all over the place, not being separate from each other. That's That's a lower level understanding of it. And that's one that ego loves to participate in because it gets to be part of it. And of course it is part of it, but not with the credential it wants to have, the one who knows about no separation. We got 4 minutes. We can close early. You guys can all take a nap. Nishigai.
What's wrong about that assertion that we're all one, or?
Yes, I can address that. So it's not that it's a horrible thing. It's totally incorrect. It's going to destroy the world and take us all down. It's not that. It's just it's a little bit flippant. Not intended that way, but it's like, well, we're all one. It's like as soon as you make that kind of pronouncement, the actual awareness that sees the incredible separation that's everywhere, it seals off, and we just go into, well, we're all one. We are the world. I'm not saying that might not be helpful in some way, but it's kind of a self-serving idealism that doesn't bother to look at the intense grasping in a self that's going on within each one of those individuals who are either saying that or hearing that or proclaiming that or agreeing with that or disagreeing with that, including this old man. More? Good question.
I have another question about the last one I asked about fear. If we're always looking at our surface particles that are covering up the fear, do we ever have to examine that? It seems like we'll be confused until we examine what's underneath those thoughts.
Eventually you would examine that. As far as this tradition is concerned, I'm not saying you couldn't in 300 million lifetimes. You're no matter what you do, you're gonna awaken. It's just inevitable insofar as time and space is concerned. But insofar as this practice in this life with this human form that you have borrowed from the elements to put on these temporary clothing of dirt, air, fire, water, and what's that other one?
Space.
Yeah, space. So it seems necessary that if you start to find this, which is what this path is about, what the Buddha stumbled into 2,500 years ago, and other lineage holders down through the centuries have passed on, trying to keep this baked bread warm, or I should say baked chicken eggs. Be careful. Then it's available right here. It's available. It's in front of you. As I often say, and I'll say again, it's what you're looking for, you're looking at. You, me, us, we just misunderstand it as something else. Something else in terms of something we really like, something else in terms of something we don't particularly care for, or something else in terms of, well, if there was a comment, it'd be more like, who cares about that? Passion, aggression, ignorance. The ignorant one is the hardest one because we're dismissive of everything. And that's an actual function of the self-centeredness, the ego mind that is protecting the illusion of a separate being, and as described as the energy or activity of narcissism. Sir?
I'm still kind of stuck on ignorance and the leading edge, the way you said that. So if impulse arises and it appears as ignorance, and we can see the leading edge of that, how can that actually be seen?
If that question is arising as what you've just described, then that's seeing it. So it even said, and this is not something, I'm not just making this up. Well, a little bit, but I can point to, so you can't find a sutra, even one I've never read, that I can't show you where what I'm pointing at is being said in these sutras. And one of them is, ask that question again.
Can I give an example?
Yes, please do.
So if I'm sitting and endeavoring to hold still and a thought comes up that I don't necessarily want to look at, I notice that before that even registers, I kind of look away.
Yeah.
And then after that happens, I realize that I looked away from something that was uncomfortable.
Yes.
So I guess I'm just wondering how to deepen.
You're doing it. You can't ask that question unless you do it. You can't actually describe that interior, so-called interior experience of how your consciousness is working unless you're doing exactly what you need to do. I would just say the eggs are half boiled. Keep boiling. Works for me. I don't know if it does for you or not. Just have to keep going. It's like the image I often use is like sometimes for me to talk to people, it's like the way they describe what's happening. They're halfway up the mountain. If awakening was about climbing a mountain and seeing the view from the top, a lot of times people are just in the middle of their particular path and they're having trouble with these branches and those sinkholes and sharp rocks and squirrels biting at their heels and stuff like that. And just say, just keep going. It's just the way the path. There's the ground, path, and fruition. The ground is life is suffering. The path is listening to what the Buddha said. Life is suffering. And it's caused by wanting something else. And it's possible to see over the top of that mountain. So, and the path is train yourself how to do that. Sit down, hold still, watch the mind continue to go. Come and go, come and go, come and go. And notice that sometimes you'll conclude and sometimes you won't. And sometimes you'll notice that you're avoiding something and then that will stop, that will back off, and then it will come back again. And it will only come back if you've misunderstood it time after time. If you really understand it, then it can't come back. And why can't it come back? Because it hasn't gone anywhere. You're no longer a person who's not avoiding things anymore. It's a very subtle credential when I'm actually not avoiding anything anymore. Totally clear.
I guess that's what I'm wondering about is the act of ignorance when it shows up. It seems like since it already came up, I don't understand it and it's just going to keep coming back. It just seems like I'm a slave to my impulses.
Mm-hmm.
So
what's your question? It seems pretty accurate to me. I don't have many students like you. Totally honest.
It's just too funny. No, I don't remember my question if I had one, but
well, I guess I've helped you then, haven't I? You got rid of that. Go ahead.
I guess I'll just ask the same question I asked before. How do you deepen an understanding that doesn't seem to come about?
Okay. All you have, I mean, I'm going to use your words or your metaphors. You see how shallow it is. That's how it becomes deeper. You go into the very relative truth that has you trapped. And you go in there with totally armed with what prajna, the two-edged sword of prajna, of the sword of Manjushri, cuts into that and cuts into this and that duality. That's the tiny microcosm that leads us to think that we're somebody in a separate world conducting separate business that can win or lose or be up or down or life or death. Just keep going. If you need a feedback, you're doing fine. Keep going. I tell a lot of people that who live here. Just keep going. One final question, if there is one. Very good. Thank you.